Hi, and welcome to Girls Lunch, your mealtime companion where we talk about food, gender, sexuality, and where everyone is welcome.
I'm Nicole Hilton.
And I'm Julia Andreas.
And Julia, have you been to a carnival?
Oh, you know I have.
I don't think we're giving away too much, carnival is in the title of this episode. We are going to be talking today about the carnival and carnival food. And I wanted to ask if you have any kind of carnival favorites to start us off with. So, favorite rides, favorite, games, favorite foods.
Funnel cake.
Oh, funnel cake? Well, then you'll be excited.
Oh, hell yeah. Funnel cake is my absolute favorite. Something that giving up dairy because of the very real allergy I have and how sick it makes me. The things I miss are mainly baked goods like donuts. Sorry, fried goods like donuts and funnel cake. And so I love me some funnel cake. I will probably make myself some funnel cake at home sometime this weekend because of this episode, I'm guessing. But foods, funnel cake, hands down. Amusements? I don't like haunted houses or scary things. And sometimes carnivals do have a spooky house or whatever, and I'm not about that. But I am all for the rides. I love me getting on a vaguely passing safety code, bolted monstrosity that just flings you around and definitely doesn't look safe and isn't safe. But by the time I've, gotten into the seat and buckled up, I've already, made peace with myself. So
yeah.
I'm ready just to be flung around and have a good time.
You are a little bit of a thrill demon. You enjoy the big roller coasters.
I love roller coasters. I love the thrill of having my form tossed about in a gravitational space.
Yes. Yeah.
But I do not like spooky, scary things though.
You'll do flips and tricks all day long, but jump scares, different. You don't like that kind of jumping.
I'm just a flip wizard. What can I say?
Yeah, exactly. I don't always like the rides, at least at carnivals, because I do fear for my own health and safety. Because when I was a teenager, I went to my local fireman's carnival. So every year in my small town, we have a carnival that the proceeds all go to benefit the local fire department. And small town, that's just what you do. You go to the carnival. And so I was there with some boys, and I was trying to impress the boys.
Oh, man.
Yeah. I don't know if it was just sometimes with certain rides, they say put the smaller person on the inside because of how you get thrown around. So I don't know if it was that. I don't know if it was just the ride was not really up to snuff or what. But I got thrown around so bad on that scrambler that I had terrible bruises for a week or so afterward.
Oh no.
So I am now very sus of carnival rides. I do love a good Viking boat, where you swing back and forth and you just go wee and you just go up real high. In terms of amusements, games, I have very mixed feelings about guns, but I do really like target shooting, and I like to think I'm good at it. I like to do darts. I'm extremely mask is why I love darts and target shooting, and I wear a lot of flannel. And maybe this was my problem, is I was trying to impress boys, but really what I should be trying to do
was impress the girls.
Yeah.
I mean, if you had the flannel and you were just hitting targets, I don't know what else girls could have asked for.
That's true. And then my favorite carnival food is really not even limited to the carnival, but I love popcorn. Oh, I love popcorn. I could eat it all day long. When I go to the carnival or the state fair or the county fair, what I like to do is I find the kettle corn booth, and I get a big, a foot-long, multiple feet-long bag of kettle corn, and I just go to town. I'll just eat on it, to the point where it's should a human consume this much popcorn? Probably not. It's, but I keep going. I don't know.
I've seen you do this. I've witnessed this with my own eyes. It's quite incredible.
Okay. Well, now that we have talked about our favorites at the carnival, we should talk about the carnival at large. So, in today's episode, I have to do a lot of like disclaimers and kind of like hedging here before we like start the episode. So today's episode is going to be about the carnival and carnival food, which we'll talk about in sort of like the second half of the episode. But to define what we mean when we say carnival, we are not talking about Carnival, the festival that happens before Lent, which is what my search results kept trying to give me, and I was like, not that type of carnival. We are talking about a traveling carnival, which has rides and booths with like games of chance, feats of skill, prizes. It moves from town to town, or it doesn't have a set location versus like an amusement park, right? A Disney World or a Universal Studios or whatever has a set location. Carnival does not. And one of the sources I read by Patrick Eastoe and Marcello Truzzi, they define the carnival as the three major features of a carnival are number 1, riding devices, number 2, shows or exhibits, and number 3, concessions. So you need kind of all of these things. The phrase riding devices really has occupied a lot of my mind space the last couple of days.
My brain just went to horse?
Yeah.
Is a horse a riding device?
It's a good question. I think they mean like mechanical rides, right?
Yeah.
Like when we say, I want to go on that ride, it's the
like
scrambler or the zipper.
Ferris wheel or whatever. Yeah, exactly. My brain is just like, a mechanical horse?
It does feel very much like you're hopping on like a mechanical bull.
Yeah.
I want to make a distinction between we are not talking about the circus either, which is sort of similar yet different. Like there's a lot of overlap, but they are kind of distinct entities. The circus is a lot more focused on like performers, your acrobats, there's animals, there's clowns. And the circus usually has like a center ring that it is all the things are happening in versus a carnival is kind of more spread out and you walk around. Even though like a lot of the food and some of the amusements kind of overlap. Now, while we're talking about overlap, there are also some overlaps between carnivals and the county or the state fair, because the two are very inextricable. Have you ever been to a county or a state fair, Julia?
I have, because they also have the rickety rides in which I love to put my body.
Yeah, so that's the thing, right, is like doing research for this episode is kind of hard to find information just about the carnival because, as we'll talk about, the carnival and the state fair really just kind of grow up next to each other, and most state fairs usually have what would we call a midway or like an amusement section where all the rides and the games and such are. I'm going to do my best to keep this carnival focused, but inevitably there will be some overlap. And I only say that because I would like to someday do episodes about like the county or the state fair. Before we get to carnival food, I think we should talk about like the origin of the carnival itself. So this section will be like a little bit less to do with food, but more about like the event, the thing. I'm going to do my best to try to keep this brief, but I can make no promises because I watch a lot of the YouTube channel Defunctland and I know way too much about this subject matter. But that's why I have a podcast, right? So that I can just talk about my niche interests and people have to listen.
I mean, that is why we made this podcast.
It's very true. So I got a lot of my information in this section from a collection of critical essays called Circuses, Carnivals, and Fairs in America, which was published in the Journal of Popular Culture in like 1972. And because it was so old, I had to go to the college library and get it on microfilm.
Oh my god.
Yeah, that was the only place I could find it was on microfilm. So I need to give a big shout out to Grace at the St. Mary's College of Maryland Library, who very painstakingly scanned and printed most of these pages for me, which I so appreciate. Okay, so origin in the carnival. Where is the exact origin of the carnival? I mean, humans be celebrating, right? We have kind of always had festivals and fairs with, music and food and fun. How long have we been gathering outside and doing fun stuff? A long time. Maybe some predecessors to the carnival would include things like medicine shows, minstrel shows, traveling theater troupes. Traveling shows are really big prior to industrialization. Essentially, before the Industrial Revolution, America is just a series of small towns, right? So, like, you know, your traveling show just goes from town to town. We don't have, like, clustered large cities until the Industrial Revolution. And I would say we really can't have the carnival until the Industrial Age because, as we've said, you can't have a carnival without riding devices.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of need that mechanization. I mean, like, you know, maybe there's some outdoor games and sideshows and that type of thing, but, like, is it really a carnival?
You need the thrill of possible bodily harm.
You do. You really do. Another important historical trend from the Industrial Age is, as we have talked about many times on this show, we get the rise of the middle class, right? Because people start moving to cities to work in factories, and because they now have, like, set working hours instead of, like, you're just on a farm working, you know, from as long as it's light outside, work is structured around those specific hours, and that also means that you have specified leisure time, right? When your work is bound to particular hours, that means that time outside of that is, like, on you or on your own. We then get the rise of the middle class with expendable leisure time and expendable cash.
Ooh.
Most historians will point to the origin of the carnival with the 1893 Chicago World's Fair or the World Columbian Exhibition. So the idea of the 1893 Chicago World's Fair is to show off new technology, inventions. There are other World's Fairs that happened before this, right? So there's some in Paris and New York and things like that. And just the idea is, like, countries are trying to show off, like, look at our amazing technology and, like, the future, progress, inventions. At the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, some inventions that we had were the zipper, the moving walkway, an electric oven.
Oh.
We also got some new foods that folks are probably familiar with, like Cracker Jacks, shredded wheat cereal, and juicy fruit gum.
Juicy fruit gum is that old?
Yeah, man.
God damn. No wonder it tastes so bad.
I think this is the second time we have dragged juicy fruit gum on our show.
I'll drag them every time they show up. I hate juicy fruit.
I promise I'm going to keep this section short, but we do really need to read this excerpt from Eustace D. Donec, who talks about some of the other things that were on exhibition at the Chicago World's Fair. So, Julia, can you please tell the people at home?
Okay. At the same time, humanity's peculiar ingenuity was revealed in such marvels as a soap statue of the Brooklyn Bridge, a replica of the U.S. Treasury Building made of coins, a tobacco castle, a model of the Liberty Bell formed from California oranges, a knight on horseback composed of prunes, a woman of chocolate, and a map of the United States made entirely out of pickles.
Yeah.
Sorry, the pickles got me.
Yeah, it sort of, like, escalates of, like, oh, wow, soap statue. Oh, tobacco castle? A knight composed of prunes?
The prunes got me, and I tried to keep it together, but the pickles just broke the dam. Oh, that's so funny.
Does that not remind you of, like, today's butter sculpting and cheese sculpting competitions at the state fair?
Oh my god. Yeah, absolutely. And I think if Julia had been around in the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, she also would have looked at these things and went, wow, this is art.
Would she have tried to steal the woman made out of chocolate?
I think she would have tried to, like, take a taste of either the prunes or the pickles. Or maybe I'd want, like, one of the oranges. I would have the ungodly desire to touch everything, which would be a problem.
Yeah. So you are not the only person impressed by such marvels. I saw different estimates. Somewhere between, like, 20 to 28 million people attended the World's Fair over the course of its run, which was just from May to October. And for context, the U.S. population was only about 63 million at the time. So, you know, almost half of the whole U.S. And also you have to figure there's probably people coming from other countries, right?
Jeebus.
Yeah, a lot of people.
It also ran for way longer than I thought. I didn't know it was like close to 6 months long.
Some other things that were constructed that I do want to mention that were not so great were native villages or human zoos.
Oh!
Yeah, it's not great. So they had indigenous peoples from far off lands like Indonesia and West Africa, where, like, you know, supposedly the fair organizers had, like, recreated their native village and people were just being native, I guess. I want to mention that because it's worth acknowledging that, you know, an 1893 fair was maybe not perfect in a lot of ways, but also that there's a history of this with the carnival. There's a big history of, like, not just, like, the exoticism of indigenous peoples. There's that. There's also, like, sideshows and kind of, like, freak shows, right? Which we aren't going to talk too much about, but I just wanted to acknowledge the idea of, like, human as spectacle as well. What's most important for our purposes in terms of, like, talking about the history of the carnival, where does the carnival come from, is this mile-long strip of amusements at the Chicago World's Fair called the Midway Plaisance, which is, I mean, this is where we get the Midway, right? The idea of, like, a carnival midway. It has the first ever Ferris wheel.
Ooh!
It has a bobsled ride that is kind of like a precursor to roller coasters, where you get in a bobsled and you, like, slide around on a track. And there's lots of, amusements. There's lots of different types of stuff going on. Dancing and tomfoolery for sure. But it's where we get the kind of idea of, like, a specific type of entertainment as, you know, like, outdoor amusement. The Chicago World's Fair is also where we get the creation of permanent state and county fairgrounds, right? So we talked about the kind of coupling of the state fair with the Midway for carnival amusements. That starts sort of like at the beginning of the carnival, right? As you have half sort of dedicated to, like, exhibitions of showing off, like, things we want to show off that we're proud of, right? Maybe it's like, look at my beautiful cows and my delicious pie. And then we have somewhere that's just kind of, like, for funsies. So, on the subject of the county and state fair, like I said, carnivals kind of grow up alongside the fair. When we're thinking specifically about state fairs or county fairs, the idea is to show off, like, agriculture, right? So, like I said, your cows, your chickens, your goats, maybe your beautiful crops. You're showing off, like, you know, the sort of bounty of your state or your region. And you're also, the idea is to, like, educate people about, like, farming and agriculture. And this is still true today with, like, 4-H and that type of thing. At the beginning of the state fair, like I said, it's mostly just agriculture. And because there's just, like, large crowds of people, traveling shows, amusements, sideshows kind of crop up alongside them. So sometimes these are sanctioned within the fair, and sometimes they are not. So they set up just outside the fair. So this is actually why it is called a sideshow, because they are literally outside of the show or the fair proper, right? So you might have, like, you know, picture your state fairground, right? There's probably a gate. Sideshows, freak shows, things like that might be positioned, like, kind of on the way to that gate or before you actually get there, if they're, like, not sanctioned by the fair. If they are, then they're inside that gate, right? Originally, fair planners, this is one of those things that, like, people have a lot of strong feelings about. Kind of like we talked about in our cooking shows episode of, like, edutainment, right? So, like, at this point, you know, the role of the fair is to, like, educate people about agriculture and farming, but we have these, like, amusements that are popping up. So, like, do we allow them into the fair? Well, if we do that, is that kind of, like, diluting or defeating the purpose of, like, we want to educate people? Does it become, like, a distraction? Eventually, most fairs kind of realize, like, people might not want to come just to learn about agriculture and farming, and that the amusements are a good way to actually draw in people. So this is where we sort of get the marrying of the two together.
Come for the ring toss, stay for Betsy the prize cow.
Exactly. So the first documented traveling carnival was the Canton, Ohio Carnival Company, which opened its first show in Chillicothe, Ohio on May 30th, 1899. Relationships between local chapters of social service organizations, so think like your Kiwanis clubs, your Elks clubs, your Moose clubs, and carnivals were mutually beneficial, right? So kind of like I was talking about earlier with my like local fire department carnival, the carnival helps draw people in and they make money, and then the charity also makes money, which they can then reinvest back into the community. Carnivals are very popular in this like early to mid 20th century period because it's pretty inexpensive to go, right?
Yeah.
And also if you're living in a small town, which at this point in history you probably are, it's exciting when the carnival comes to town, right? You can put down your rake and your shovel or put your plow away and you can go to the ring toss or whatever and have some fun. Carnival season runs roughly from like spring through fall. This is still true today, right? Think of like when is the county fair, when is the state fair? It's usually in this sort of like warm weather, nice outdoor times. So carnivals, this is also still true somewhat. I think it's more commercialized now. But carnivals will travel from town to town, usually staying for like a long weekend before moving on, right? So, Wednesday until Sunday or Monday, and then they move on to the next place. Because of this, right? Because of this kind of transient nature.
Transient.
Yeah, exactly. We here in America don't trust people who don't own property, even though we tightly control who can own property.
If you can't own property, and we don't like you, but we only like it if certain people have the property. So it's almost like gatekeeping who we like.
Aunt Sammy says gaslight, gatekeep, girl boss.
Yeah, she does.
So because of this kind of like transient nature of carnivals, right, the moving around, they kind of acquire a reputation for being dishonest and for carnies, which is the term for folks running the carnival, to be like seedy or untrustworthy.
They were just sweaty. Give them a break.
Yeah, sometimes they're just sweaty. Sometimes they come from a different ethnic background that we just don't trust for reasons.
And they don't have land. So it's just
and they don't
like,
have land.
3 ticks. 3 strikes, they're out.
The short answer to our carnival's rigged, or like our carnival games rigged, is like, it's like a little bit yes and a little bit no. So I read an article in that collection that I talked about that was super helpful in kind of breaking this down. The article, this is a great title, was called Hanky Panks and Group Games versus Alibis and Flats. The
Wait,
legitimate what? And... No, that's not even the whole title, Julia.
Oh, what?
The Legitimate and Illegitimate of the Carnival's Front End by Theodore Dombrowski. So this guy, I would love to sit down and talk to this guy. It's an old article, so I don't know if that is still possible, but...
R.I.P.
R.I.P. Well, I don't know. Let's not continue our proud podcast tradition of like killing off all of our authors and source material.
I take back the R.I.P. I'm sorry, Theodore.
This guy just has like a cool background, which is that he grew up in a carnival family, so he was kind of raised in and around the carnival, and then he became a sociologist, like went to school, and so is now sort of using his combination of personal experience and like school learning to kind of examine that culture. So he says that there are some just like straight up illegitimate or rigged games, and he kind of explains like how these games are rigged using lots of really cool terms, kind of like carnival language of like, well, you have this type of game, which is called this, and you have this type of game, which is called this. But he says that these just like straight up, rigged games are becoming rarer and rarer, mostly because carnivals want to come back year after year. It's in their best business interest to not be totally ripping people off, because then when the state fair for next year rolls around, if the, local county fair board has gotten a lot of complaints, they might not want to invite you back. It's more likely not necessarily that the game is completely rigged and impossible to win. It's more likely that the game just, like, seems easier to win than it actually is. But it is possible to win, if that makes sense.
Have you ever won one?
Yes, I've won Carnival games before.
Oh, nice.
There are also, like, I mean, there's different types, right? There's games that are the, like, prize every time, right? So there's a common one is, like, you pull the duck out of the little pond, right? And it's got, like, a certain color on the bottom, or you have to get a certain number of points. Darts is very similar. Sometimes you're just going to get, like, a small prize, you know. There are definitely some that are, like, harder to win than others.
I once had a guy blow $50 trying to get me a toy from a ring toss game.
Dang! Speak on that.
Well, he didn't get it, and I told him to stop after, like, try number 2, but he kept going, and then he didn't have $50. And then I needed to buy him pizza later, because he didn't have any money.
Dang!
And I was just like, I told you. I didn't
this
want
is not impressive.
this. Yeah, I'm. Whatever you were trying to do backfired, my man.
Oh man,
I've never won one of those, like, harder games.
I don't know if I have ever won, like, the big, like, stuffed animal. You know, usually it's just like the little ones. I think we will revisit your example a little bit later in the program when we get wiggy with it.
Ooh.
Around the 1970s, the popularity of the traveling carnival starts to kind of dip. Since if you figure by the 1960s, we have interstate highways, right? It makes it a lot easier to travel to large amusement parks like Disneyland, Coney Island, Knott's Berry Farm, wherever you're going. I do think it's kind of funny that it used to be that the amusements would come to you with a traveling carnival, but now it's the other way around of, like, you go to amusement, you know?
Wow.
I was also reading an article that, like, makes it sound very like The Simpsons Old Man Yells at Cloud, where it was like talking about, you know, the declining popularity of carnivals because of rock and roll music, or just like basic. And I mean, I see the point they're trying to make of just like, we now have mass culture and like amusements that are extremely accessible. We have TV, we have radio, now we have computers and video games. There's just, like, lots more types of entertainment that's, like, just more easily accessible. But it was just it just read very much of, like, these kids today with their rock and roll concerts and the television. They don't go to the carnival anymore.
Back in my day, the carnival used to come to us, and we would get on the Ferris wheel, and sure, maybe little Timmy died back in 52 when the Ferris wheel broke and he got flung into the lake. But that was just living back then. Kids these days, they just don't live anymore.
Maybe you would lose your whole paycheck on, you know, a rigged shell game, trying to win your girl a stuffed, I don't know. So, next, I want to talk about carnival food and some of our favorite carnival foods. But before we do that, Julia, can you give us the food fact of the day, please?
I certainly can. Let's go.
Let's go.
Cool. So I was originally going to do it about cheeseburgers, but then I wanted to do it about marshmallows instead. So here we are. Nicole, it's almost Thanksgiving. And when I think Thanksgiving, I think turkey.
Right.
And when I think turkey, I think about the sides.
Yeah.
And when I think about the sides, I think about the unholy sin against nature that is a sweet potato casserole.
I knew where you were going with this.
And so today we're going to try and answer the question, why does it have marshmallow on it? Why it do that? So going to start with like the sort of history of marshmallows. I think this has been a trivia fact for so long that most people already know it, but did you know that the soft, spongy confection of a marshmallow that we eat today gets its name from an actual plant?
Yes, but I am unsure of the relationship between like the marshmallow. I almost said fruit. Nope, it's not a fruit at all. I'm unsure of the relationship between the marshmallow plant and the marshmallow confection that we eat today.
Sure, so we'll definitely learn about that. but the marshmallow plant itself, which is the predecessor, the ancestor of modern marshmallows, is a very ancient herb that's like native to Europe and Asia and much of the old world. And it was often used for like medicinal properties, and the whole plant's edible. In the 1800s, it was actually used to create cough syrup, essentially. And the leaves of the plant were often eaten as a salad. And here I have provided a picture of the marshmallow.
Aww.
It does not look anything like I had expected. I always thought marshmallows plants kind of look like cattails or something like that.
I don't know if I had any expectations for what it looked like.
Yeah, so for our listeners at home, a marshmallow plant is just like a long stalk of a plant. It comes in like a big bunch, leaves sticking out of the side, kind of think like a small sunflower shape. But then it has along the top these very pretty, like pink purpley flowers. So in the marshmallow plant, the roots were where all the good stuff was. So by thinly slicing and boiling the root, you're left with twice the root's weight in, quote, mucilaginous gel.
Huh.
So it produces kind of like chia seeds, kind of like flax seeds. If you boil the root, it will just produce this thick gelatinous substance.
And somebody thought we should eat that.
And people were like, that looks like a yummy time. Specifically, ancient Egyptians who took the yummy gel and they mixed it with honey to create kind of like the very, very ancient ancestor of a modern marshmallow. And this little candy was reserved for the gods and royalty, so it must have been pretty tasty if they're keeping it from the peasant folk.
Or it's really bad, but they don't want everybody, like, if it's only reserved for the highest class, it's like caviar, you know, if it's only for rich people, if it is just as a status symbol.
It's unattainable. Well, you could find out if you took some mallow root and boiled it and then mixed the gel with honey, but I'm not gonna do that because we have technology, and with technology, we have marshmallows. So, the transition to the modern s'mores center of a marshmallow began in France sometime around 1850, when Parisian confectioners began to use the root gel to bind egg whites, corn syrup, which by the way was created in 1811.
Wow.
I know, so old, right? And water to create what we would consider today like a marshmallow. After they heated the mixture, they poured it into small individual molds dusted with cornstarch. Obviously, this was way time consuming. It would take a while to get yourself like a bowl of marshies. And then mass production of marshmallows became more possible with the invention of the starch mogul system of manufacturing. In 1899, a very exciting year, the starch mogul is a machine that fills a tray with cornstarch, stamps a mold into the starch, so it leaves like a little hole or like a divot of the mold, and then pours like the mixture into the molds. That way you can just shake off the starch, reuse it after the marshmallow sets, and then you can just keep going. So it made marshmallow making way faster, way easier, and because of that, it was more available, and because of that, it was more popular.
Right.
So then some American guy came along and was like, I can make money by doing this better.
As Americans love to do. That is our national pastime.
As he loves to do. And so in 1955, Alex DeMock of DeMock Inc. patented a new manufacturing method called the extrusion process.
Oh.
This invention changed the history of marshmallow production and is what we use today. So instead of like stamping a mold, pouring it in, shaking it off, we just extrude marshmallows.
Question, he was not the first guy to ever extrude anything, right?
No, I don't think so.
I would be really impressed. And I would also be like, we didn't figure that out till 1955.
I'm pretty sure we figured that out probably like 1855.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also like around a little earlier than this is when we swapped from using like the root gel to create marshmallows, and when it became more like a manufactured process, that's when we started using like gelatin to create marshmallows. Probably because it was more readily available than a root.
I wonder if there's any flavor difference There has to be a little bit, right?
There is. They used to actually flavor marshmallows with, like, marshmallow root extract. I would be really curious to know what that tastes like. But our modern marshmallows today don't taste like the ones that would have been around in, like, the 1900s. So to get to the heart of the question, why are marshmallows on sweet potatoes? My first thought when thinking about this food fact of the day was that it probably had to do with clever marketing of marshmallow producers. And that was probably in the form of recipe books that were published by companies or, like, recipes that came with products.
Right.
And I was 100% right.
Yes.
So, in 1917, Angelus Marshmallow Company, which, by the way, founded by the same guy who made Cracker Jacks.
Oh, what?
So, a fun tie-in
It's all
there.
coming together.
It's all coming together, baby! They wanted more people to eat marshmallows, like, on the daily for every occasion. It's not enough that you're just, like, snacking on them. Like, they have to be making stuff with marshmallows constantly.
This is the, like, shampoo manufacturers putting, like, rinse and repeat on the shampoo bottles so that you'll buy just as much. Or
Exactly.
double as much.
And so they hit up Janet Mackenzie Hill, founder of the Boston Cooking School magazine,
Oh.
to develop recipes for a booklet designed to encourage home cooks to embrace the marshmallow as an everyday ingredient. And this booklet of recipes included the first recipe of mashed sweet potatoes with marshmallows called sweet potato pudding.
Oh.
And while marshmallows on sweet potatoes seems like a totally out of left field thing today, apparently it was not back in, like, early 1900s, late 1800s. A New York Times article from 1901 recommends that you serve marshmallows at Thanksgiving in, like, a crazy bowl made out of other stuff.
Huh.
So I included the recipe here, and I shall read it to you. Odd little marshmallow baskets are formed of a paste which is made of half of a cup of butter, 1 cup of sugar, 2 egg yolks, and whites beaten separately, 2 tablespoonfuls of milk, 2 1/2 cups of flour, and 2 rounded teaspoons of baking powder. The paste may be flavored with vanilla, or a little chocolate can be melted and added, making dark baskets for the white centers. The latter are of the marshmallows, which are placed upon 4-inch diamonds of the paste rolled thin, and 2 points of the diamonds brought together and pressed into position over the marshmallows. So you essentially have, like, fancy little marshmallow cages to display your marshmallows on Thanksgiving. It was a very fascinating article.
Yeah, I'm still trying to parse, like, my mind palace is having trouble constructing, like, what this would look like.
Yeah, so they essentially, like, make fondant, and then with the fondant, they delicately wrap little marshmallows in a little fondant cage.
I see.
And then they place those upon the Thanksgiving table, apparently. And also really popular at the time were candied sweet potatoes or yams. And so it makes sense if you think about contextually at the time, you had candied sweet potatoes and yams, and you had crazy marshmallow contraptions. It would make sense then to, like, put marshmallows on top of sweet potatoes. Like, it wasn't that far of a leap as it would be today.
Right. I mean, you just got marshmallows just sitting there on the table, you know?
Yeah, man.
Might as well just put them in there. I think I've been watching too many of the man on TikTok that I call the Chocolate Wizard or the Chocolate Man.
Yes, I love him.
Who just, I think his name is, he's got a very French name. It's like Amory Gauchon or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
He is a chocolate wizard. He makes everything out of chocolate. I'm just like, he would, I'm imagining him with, like, making these little marshmallow baskets.
Mm-hmm.
Just like, I don't know.
He would thrive, I feel like, if he was born in the time of, like, the Chicago World Fair, right?
That's
like,
true. Yeah.
You know, he would walk up with his house made of chocolate, like a fully functional house just made of chocolate.
Yeah.
But that is our food fact of the day. Why do sweet potatoes have marshmallow? Because capitalism.
Yay.
Yay.
Because like so many things on this show, because advertising told us to. And we said, well, what a good idea.
Well, if the advertisement's telling me to do it, it can't possibly be wrong.
Why would a corporation lie to me?
I trust this picture of a lady in an apron. She wouldn't lie to me. Look at that face. She looks happy eating this sweet potato pudding, which means it must be good.
Well, now that we have talked about a Thanksgiving food, I think we should talk about some carnival food.
Yes! Yes!
So we will get to your funnel cake, Julia.
Okay.
But putting that aside, I just want to know, like, what foods come to mind when you picture the carnival? Or if I say carnival food, what are you thinking of?
Cotton candy.
Okay.
Fried Oreos. Lemonade.
Oh, yeah.
That's not really a food, but lots and lots of fried things. Probably like hot dogs.
Yeah.
Hot dogs, stuff on a stick.
You've already guessed the first two things you guessed. You have already gotten what I have on the list. So
Ah, nice.
I was like, were you peeking at the notes?
I wasn't, I promise.
You're just very talented, and we share one brain cell.
We do.
So another disclaimer, because I'm full of them. I'm going to try not to go into too much detail on the individual history of each of these, just because that's future episode material, baby. A lot of these will probably overlap with another future episode I would like to do about concessions or concession stands, which is why I skipped popcorn. So, we will start with cotton candy. Cotton candy is also called, it has many names, apparently. It is also called candy floss or fairy floss in the UK or Australia. So some other fun names from other countries around the world, and these are just like English translations of, obviously, the original. So in France, it is called daddy's beard.
Don't like that.
In the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, it is called girl's hair.
Okay.
And in Egypt, it is called girl's yarn.
All right. I like fairy floss the best, I think.
Yeah, I've definitely heard that one pretty frequently. And candy floss. But we here in America call it cotton candy.
America.
So we're going to call it cotton candy. Cotton candy's, maybe grandmother or predecessor would probably be spun sugar, which is not exactly the same thing because it's, at least, historically it was only available to the rich because sugar is expensive and spun sugar is hard to make. It's very delicate.
Mm-hmm.
So cotton candy is invented by a real odd couple named William Morrison, who is a dentist, and John C. Wharton, who is a candy maker.
All right.
He's a dentist and he's a candy maker. What could they possibly have in common?
This does seem like some sort of sitcom where they fall in love.
Yeah. Instead, they just invent cotton candy. But maybe the love was the cotton candy they found along the way or something. So so I don't know why a dentist would want to invent candy. Maybe something about like infinite profit. Like if I invent candy that will cause children to get cavities, which will then cause them to come to me, a dentist. Except I don't know if we actually knew that sugar like damaged your teeth at this point in history. This is like 1897, so I'm like, I might be giving them too much credit.
Maybe he had a sweet tooth. But
So in 1897, our odd couple patented an electric candy machine, which is a metal bowl with a spinning head that was filled with sugar and perforated with holes.
That is the most tame name for a machine from, like, the 1800s I've ever heard.
Yeah.
They're usually like, Mr. Finnegan's wild, crazy machine that makes the spin sugar into a big, fluffy cloud.
Yeah.
This is quite tame in comparison.
That's very true. As you'll sort of see as we talk about some other carnival foods, cotton candy makes its debut at the 1904 World's Fair in St. Louis. The official title for that World's Fair is the Louisiana Purchase Exposition of 1904.
Womp womp.
Because we just love celebrating colonialism, I guess.
Yep.
So at the 1904 World's Fair, they sold... I don't know how they got this exact of a number, but this is the number that I got in a National Geographic article. 68,655 servings of cotton candy. again, I don't know who is there, like, tallying each of these up.
That's very specific, yeah.
But they sold them in these, like, little wooden boxes. It's very cute. Each serving of cotton candy was sold for 25 cents per box, which you might be thinking, like, oh, like, 25 cents. That's cheap, because it's, like, old-timey times. For context, tickets to the St. Louis World's Fair were 50 cents. So you were paying, like, half the price of admission for a box of cotton candy.
For a little box of sugar.
Yeah, sugar and air. But they sold, almost 69,000 of them, so people really liked it anyway. Can you check and see check like an inflation calculator and see like how much would 25 cents be in 1904, or like what would that be now?
That is not as high as I was expecting. It would only be like $9 today.
Okay, which is kind of funny because I'm like, in today's economy, I feel like it wouldn't be unheard of for me to go to like maybe a large sporting event and probably pay like $9 for a large bag of cotton candy now,
Well, mostly I'm like, that means admission to the World's Fair was like $20. And I'm like, that seems cheap.
Yeah, it's a great deal.
It seems so cheap.
Our friends Morrison and Wharton called their creation, they actually call it fairy floss. And there's another guy who strangely is also a dentist.
All right.
Who came up with the name Cotton Candy when he makes his own version of the electric candy machine.
Okay, dentists. I see your secret plot.
Cotton candy sort of like is at the carnival from the beginning, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's only 10 years after the Columbian exhibition. So it just sort of like crops up at a World's Fair, similar to a state fair. As I said, like, there's a lot of, like, things are happening sort of, like, at the same time. Okay, now it is time to talk about your beloved funnel cake.
Oh, yeah, baby!
I think probably most people who are listening know what funnel cake is, but do you want to just give people a quick description?
Sure. Have you ever had a pancake? Have you ever looked at your pancake batter and thought to yourself, I would like this better if it was deep fried and tubular and in a sort of nesting shape? Well, that's funnel cake for you, where they take essentially pancake batter, they put it in a funnel into a deep fryer and form a little nest shape, and then they cover that bad boy with delicious, delicious powdered sugar, the cocaine of the food world. And then if you're 10-year-old Julia, you eat the whole thing in under 5 minutes.
Wow.
And you have a terrible tummy ache and you barf later.
Oh, no.
It was worth it.
I wanted to clarify just because I kept reading when I was researching about funnel cake, elephant ears.
Yeah.
I think that's more of a thing in the Midwest, not so much here.
I think so, yeah.
They're like similar, but not exactly the same thing. As Julia said, they're called funnel cakes because you use a funnel to pour it, like batter is poured through a funnel into a fryer. In German, it is called, I'm going to do my best, Drechterkuch.
My dad will tell me later if that's not correct.
Okay. People use different batters, like Julia said. A lot of folks use an unleavened kind of pancake batter. There are other folks who say it's better to use a choux pastry batter. Alton Brown is one of these people.
I trust him. I mean, it doesn't make a difference to me. I'll eat it either way.
So, sort of like we've been talking about, a lot of these things are like really hard to research because it's like it's just fried dough, right? We all know humans be frying dough. Humans love to fry dough. And it's hard to kind of pin down like what would the origin of this be. There are some medieval Anglo-Norman and Old English cooking manuscripts that have recipes for deep-fried fritters that are made by poking a hole into a bowl. So, like, sort of that idea of, like, the swirling technique or that type of thing. These are called, again, I'm really just doing my best with these different European languages, Minzbeck, Blauch-Escreps, and crisps, which is just like crisps, but with a Y.
I like that word.
Like Michaelin, or, white people got a hold of crisps, I guess. Again, it's really hard to pin, like, where did this come from? Because this is probably one of those things that, like, not to say, like, has always existed, but has, like, probably existed in slightly different forms in different parts of the world. Even when I was researching this, they were like, there's a Middle Eastern type of funnel cake, and it's called blah. And there's this type of funnel cake from this part of the world, and it's called this. And it's just like basically different variations of fried dough in like kind of similar, using a similar technique. So it's like, it's really impossible to determine like who was the first. And I don't want to use our podcast to spread misinformation. So I am going to clarify that this is a common theory or a common story that is repeated. I have no idea how true it is, but a lot of folks say that funnel cake originated with German immigrants in Pennsylvania, if you know the Pennsylvania Dutch. Folks have stated that Pennsylvania Dutch often served something similar to funnel cake at like Christmas or New Year's celebrations as like a special treat. That may or may not be true. This part of the story is much more likely to be true. Similar to cotton candy, funnel cake made its debut at the Kutztown Folk Festival in 1952. Great success!
Yes! I love the Borat voice.
We're just on a tour of Europe right now. The Kutztown Folk Festival originated as a way to celebrate Pennsylvania Dutch culture. So I think that's sort of like the reason for that connection. Whether the funnel cake is actually from the Pennsylvania Dutch, who's to say? But at least that's probably where our modern version of the funnel cake comes from. I came across this in my research and had to include it. So American hero Joey Chestnut, we love him, holds the world record for funnel cake eating. He doesn't just do hot dogs, folks.
How many things does he eat? Like,
oh, he actually has world records for lots of foods. I want to say he has the world record for grilled cheese, too.
Joey.
Julia, please tell the people at home of Joey Chestnut's accolades vis-a-vis funnel cake eating.
Why does anyone else ever bother again with anything, right? Like,
I don't know.
If I was a competitive eater and Joey Chestnut was still around kicking down, like, world records left and right, why try? You're not gonna beat him. He ate, like, what, 10,000 hot dogs? Is impossible. Anyway, I'll read the quote now.
So tell us about how many funnel cakes he ate.
Okay. With the Roddick and Federer of competitive eating going head-to-head, it was sure to be an intense funnel cake eating championship at King's Dominion in Daweswell, Virginia. After regulation, it indeed came down to a tie. Both Joey Chestnut and Pat Bertoletti consumed a world record of 5.9 pounds of funnel cake. An eat-off ensued, and Joey downed 1.45 pounds to Pat's 1.04 pounds. Crown to Joey.
And this was in 10 minutes.
In 10 minutes?
He ate almost 6 pounds of funnel cake. Well, actually, I guess he ate more than that. Also, the idea of an eat-off is insane to me. Insane.
You just did that, though.
You just did that. You stuffed your... Like, you have eaten and eaten and eaten. You've done the thing, right? And then you get to it, and they're like, it's a tie. And you have to do it again. Insane. And then American hero, Mr. Chestnut, goes and does it and eats another 1.5 pounds of funnel cake. Animal.
Absolute feral cryptid Joey Chestnut.
Okay, so the last food that I wanted to talk about, you also mentioned, is sort of like deep fried Oreos, deep fried Twinkies, deep fried butter, deep fried shoe. We here in America, we're just deep frying everything.
Wait, what was the last one?
The shoe.
Deep fried shoe?
We'll talk about it.
Okay.
Basically, I just wanted to talk about like the presence of deep fried food at the carnival. So we're going to start with the deep fried Oreo, which was pretty definitively invented by Chicken Charlie, not his Christian name. Chicken Charlie or Charlie Bogosian in 2002 at the Los Angeles County Fair. And Charlie is a true master of the deep fried fair food craft. He is the son of Armenian immigrants. He came to the U.S. / San Diego when he was 11. Started working summers at the San Diego County Fair, making and selling charbroiled corn at age 14. Worked a lot of summers at the fair, and then he eventually bought his own food trailer in 1996. that specialized in chicken, which then became Chicken Charlie's. Carnivals travel around, right? From place to place. They go to different state fairs and whatnot throughout the year or throughout the season. I think this is true for a lot of these food vendors as well. Chicken Charlie, throughout his career, he goes to different state fairs or county fairs and whatnot. He perfects the deep fried Twinkie because he's at like some other state fair and he sees somebody who like makes a deep fried Twinkie, but he's like, this ain't it, bro. And he like kind of perfects the recipe and like makes it like, I think he said the other guys was just like really soggy and soft and sad, and he makes it much more crispy and that type of thing. He also invents the deep fried Oreo, like we said, and he has invented many other deep fried creations. So Julia, please read for us Chicken Charlie's resume.
Okay. They call him Chicken Charlie, and at his eponymous stand, he has offered deep-fried pickles, olives, s'mores, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, Twinkies, cheesecake, cupcakes, frog legs, White Castle cheeseburgers, and more. Name it, and Chicken Charlie has probably battered and fried it. Plenty of vendors offer breaded, oil-soaked concoctions, but few have so thoroughly dedicated themselves to the way of the deep fryer. There are many other fried foods at the fair, but I specialize in it. I make it my life, he says. So he took the grocery store, battered it, and fried it, huh?
100%. Okay, so you thought I was joking when I said shoe earlier? In an article I read, Chicken Charlie says he has deep fried a man's shoe before.
What?
He does not fear God.
What?
Okay? Like, he gives a quote where he is just
Did the man eat it, though?
I don't know, but he gives a quote that's like, give me anything and I'll deep fry it. And they're like, the author sounds like a little bit unnerved because they're like, I could tell he wasn't joking, So, like I said, he's the son of Armenian immigrants. Immigrants getting it done,
Mm-hmm.
In the article that I read, that you just read a quote from, that was published in 2009, he was talking about he hopes to publish his own cookbook, open his own restaurant chain, and since then, he did open his own restaurant in San Diego, and he and his business still run a stall at Southern California County Fairs.
Good for him.
He's still coming up with new fried foods.
Good for you, Chicken Charlie.
Yeah. So, why do we love fried food specifically at the carnival? I mean, humans, we just generally love fried food, right? Tastes good.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's obviously that. Fried food is also really quick to make, and it's easy to walk around with, right? It's usually pretty portable, at least depending on what you're frying, Food on a stick, also very portable. Seating is usually pretty sparse at a carnival. This article from Thrillist that is, basically exactly this question of, why do we like fried food at the carnival? So could you please read, Julia, these two little paragraphs here from this Thrillist article?
Aye, aye, Captain. If you're talking about state fairs and carnivals, you're talking about a very small operating area. It's really tiny in those booths, and you have to serve a whole lot of people, says Abel Gonzalez Jr., who earned the nickname Fried Jesus by inventing both fried Coke and deep fried butter. Consider chicken drumsticks. Baked in an oven, you're looking at 35 to 40 minutes. Grilled on the stovetop, you need at least 30 to 35 minutes with a 10-minute rest time. Deep fried? Boil for 10 minutes, batter, then fry until golden brown, about 5 minutes. Even putting taste aside, the choice seems obvious.
I thought that this was just a good kind of explanation for that.
Yeah, it's tasty and it's a little bit bad. Ooh.
Oh.
And it's really fast. So it's the total package.
The number of articles I read that that were oh, it's not good for you, of the whole fried food thing, or it's just it has so much calories and cholesterol, and it's look, man, nobody here is pretending that deep fried butter is good for you, okay? we all know, it's fine. It was just, I definitely was reading articles that was tell me this was written in the obesity epidemic era without telling me this was written in the obesity epidemic era. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Even though when I was reading about cotton candy was like, actually, cotton candy has just as many calories as a lot of other deep-fried fair foods, so it's not as good for you as you'd think, or something like that. And it's like,
who thought cotton candy was, like, good? It's just sugar. Like...
Yeah. It's like, no one here's pretending, you know?
No. Tasty things and little treats are special not because they provide you with necessary nutrients, but because they provide you with happiness.
Exactly. I mean, I think that's also part of the fair or the carnival, right? You are there explicitly to have fun, to be amused. And so I think having, you know, I mean, if you want to call it like a guilty pleasure or whatever you want to call it, food that is like not, you know, nutritionally optimal is, I think that really goes hand in hand with that, of like, it just sort of contributes to the overall atmosphere.
You can pull my funnel cake from my greasy, sticky 10-year-old hands.
I will eat my 2-foot bag of kettle corn in a questionable amount of time.
I mean, giving Joey Chestnut a run for his money with how fast you eat that popcorn, really.
I think I'm actually a marathon runner, whereas Joey Chestnut is a sprinter, you know?
True.
My eating of kettle corn is sort of just continuous.
So you could eat the same amount as Joey Chestnut, just over a longer course of time.
I think so, yeah. Which is impressive given my tiny body.
I mean, listeners who do not know Nicole, she does not look like a person who could inhale a 4-liter bag of kettle corn in 10 minutes.
Let's be clear. I was just at my alumni college campus, and no one batted an eye at me, and I definitely just looked like a student there.
Yeah.
So that tells you what you need to know.
That tells you everything you need to know.
So while we're talking about Carnival Fun Place,
woo woo,
do we want to be fun and get wiggy with it?
Let's get wiggy with it!
Okay, maybe it's obvious. Like we said, carnivals are fun. Specifically, carnivals are a place where women can go for leisure time.
Oh?
Which may sound like maybe an overly simplistic statement, but like, let me kind of get to what I mean here. So remember how we were talking earlier in the episode about people moving to cities and working factory jobs, clerical jobs, creating the middle class, and that sort of like structured work time and leisure time? Class, do we remember who was working a lot of those jobs?
Ladies!
Yay!
Yay! Gold star!
Yes. Okay, so women. And that is like a huge movement and change in the social order at this point. So up until the 19th century, women really didn't get much leisure time, right? Or if they did, it was kind of within the context of the home or these sort of like specified spaces, like maybe church. Maybe you have like a ladies group or like a sewing circle or something like that. But it's very much in the context of the home. Men, meanwhile, had clubs and bars and saloons outside of the home where they could go to, you know, hang out with the boys. But women's leisure is mostly passive or still taking place within the home, like sewing. You're sitting by the fireplace and you're doing your stitchery. When women start working in factories during the Industrial Revolution, as we've said, they move from that like private sphere into the public sphere. Mm-hmm. So because they are no longer kind of confined to leisure at home, they can now experience leisure in other places.
Yeah, this definitely relates back to the restaurant episode where like once women had like this out-of-home time, that's when restaurants became way more popular. Specifically like ladies' cafes and things, because it was like a place for them to eat before they go home, and therefore transitioned to like a place to meet outside of the home, because like you said, women were no longer strictly in the home all day, every day, doing home things.
They also have the sewing machine, which means that they no longer have to be sewing and mending all the damn time.
I feel that.
Yeah. A book that I consulted for this section that I will someday read all of because it seems super cool is called Cheap Amusements, Working Women and Leisure in the Turn of the Century New York by Kathy Peiss. It's not exactly the carnival, but it is still touching on a lot of kind of what we're talking about here. So, because obviously, like, New York City is a little bit different than kind of like your small town America. But Peiss talks about basically how working class women, especially like young women or women from immigrant families, sought out entertainment like dancing, movie theaters, and amusement parks. Specifically, she talks about Coney Island, which is like kind of the first like real amusement park as we kind of know it today, where it is like a designated place that has kind of permanent rides and stuff set up. This era is kind of the creation of mass culture, or this idea of kind of like passive amusement, like things that you do for fun. You go to the movies, you go dancing, that type of thing. So like I said, Coney Island is like not exactly a carnival. It's a little bit different. It is like a standing amusement park, but I do think it is applicable still to carnivals. So true for Coney Island and true for carnivals. They both used to be kind of raunchy, or at least in the sense of like risque with girly shows, aka, you know, like strip teases and that type of thing. But they were cleaned up.
Boo.
They were cleaned up once promoters realized that women liked coming and they could sell more tickets if they made their shows more appealing to more viewers, right? Mm-hmm. So think of your NFL selling pink jerseys or whatever it is to try to get women in the door. Once they realize, like, hey, wait a minute, there's a whole 50% of the population, roughly, that we're not tapping into here. If we change the show a little bit, then maybe that will bring in additional customers.
I think the girlies were there for the strip teases. I'm just saying. I don't think it was a mistake that they went to those, you know?
That's where I should have been going to impress people, to impress ladies with my darts and my shooting abilities. Mm-hmm. So the carnival also presents an opportunity for couples to date outside of the confines of previous dating conventions. So I don't remember if I talked about this on the show or not, but I did a whole research project in undergrad about how dating norms have changed over hundreds of years in America. And I'm not going to go through all of that right now, but the short version is like previously courtship was confined to the home, right? So like, you know, if you have a suitor, a young man would call on a young lady. So just sort of like the young man would come to your house. They would like chat politely in the parlor, somewhere like very public, very visible. Well, not public, but like you're not up in your room with a closed door.
Scandalous.
You are usually in the presence of like your parents or there's other like adults around. The lady is probably doing something like very respectable, like playing the piano.
Think Pride and Prejudice.
Yeah. Around sort of the same time that we're talking about here, the 1910s, 1920s, because women are working and earning their own income and moving outside the home and into the public sphere, women start challenging social norms in a lot of ways, like we've talked about. This includes dating. Rather than dating just within the home, dates start to happen outside of the home, right? And you might go to one of these like cheap amusements like we talked about, right? You might go to the movies. You might go to Coney Island. A common date, as we have probably seen in much media, is to go to the carnival or the circus or an amusement park, that type of thing.
Or to a Chinese restaurant.
Yes.
And then get arrested.
Equally scandalous. It seems kind of weird maybe to us to think about it now, but like the idea is like women are going out unsupervised, right? There's no like adult chaperone there. Even though you are out in a like public place where other people can see you, older people have a lot of anxiety about it because there's no like kind of parental chaperoning, overseeing happening. This, as I've said, is like most unorthodox. And we have a huge moral panic about this. Teens are going places unsupervised, in public, without adults, and we're really, really nervous about it.
They might kiss someone.
Well, to some degree, this, I think, is the kind of like classic, older generation or parents freaking out about the kids today type of moral panic and the kind of like pearl clutching because culture changes, right? Things are changing with the young people and it's different than what I did, so it's scary.
Mm-hmm.
And some of that is true, but like maybe the parents are just a little bit right just this one time. Just a little bit. In the sense that the carnival or amusement parks do provide an opportunity for smooching.
Oh, geez. One brain cell, man. Same brain.
Were you getting to this?
I didn't even read the notes ahead of time. I was just trying to make it funny when I said kiss.
No, and so that's what they do, right? So like have you ever seen like a cartoon or a TV show where there's like a tunnel of love ride?
Yeah.
You know, there's a tunnel of love or like Old Mill ride, which is, for those that don't know, like a dark, slow-moving ride. It's usually like a water ride. You're in like a little boat. And the reason that gets played up as like, oh, tunnel of love, oh, it's so romantic, is because it's dark, slow-moving. If you have ever seen a cartoon with a tunnel of love and been like, I don't get that. Like, what's that all about? Like, what, are they supposed to kiss or something? Or something.
Or something.
They are not exaggerating. So this does give teens an opportunity to, like, be alone together in a small, dark space. And, you know, that little boat's not very big. So you can use your imagination as to what they might do with that time and setting. And what they might do with that time and setting is increase the teen birth rate, which is... what happened, which is a little bit of like what happens in this period. Also, we have the automobile, which definitely also leads to more teen pregnancies.
Ooh,
because,
baby.
You know, getting busy in the back seat.
I would feel I could not, in a public place, like, what kind of brazenness do you have to have, man?
Well, so basically, like, what they would do is, like, they would intentionally, like, stop the boat. Like, the teens, you would, like, reach out and, like, hold on to the whatever, and you'd, you know, be smooching or doing whatever you're doing, to the point where some amusement parks would actually, I mean, they'd put up cameras and stuff like that, wouldn't necessarily deter people. They used to actually put, like, attendants in different parts of the ride.
That poor attendant.
To catch people with a flashlight, and I believe at one point, there was a guy who had, like, a plastic bat that was, like, in charge of, like, tapping on teens of, like, hey.
You're going to horny jail.
Yeah. Pretty much, yeah. Pretty much. Putting all of our horniness aside, I mean, I think if we want to be a little more, like, romantic, I would say that, you know, even more intense rides, like the zipper, the octopus, the teacup, something where your body is being thrown hither and yon. You're still seated close to your date, and you're showing some kind of vulnerability by, like, laughing or screaming, and that, you know, can, like, make you feel closer to that person.
Or it could leave you terribly battered and bruised.
And you'll never ride a carnival ride again. Or, you know, we could think of your example, Julia, like you were talking about. There's also the classic trope of trying to win your date a prize at one of the, like, game stalls. You could spend $50 trying to win your date a prize, and then she has to buy you pizza later. The Dombrowski article that I read earlier, or the one that I was talking about earlier, where he sort of gives you, like, here's the insight on the carnival world and the various types of games in carnival society. He talks about how some game runners would literally target teens for this reason.
Wow.
So, like, depending on, you know, the type of game that you're running, the person running the game will be, like, on the lookout for, you know, they're always trying to, like, call people over of, like, hey, come on, you know, prize every time or whatever. And there are particular types of games that Dombrowski says, like, are especially effective with young adults for that reason of, like, clout or trying to impress your date, that type of thing.
Ego. A teen boy's ego is a great way to make some quick cash.
Yep. So that is what I have for this episode.
Woo!
This, I think, just sort of will pave the way for future episodes about, like, the state fair and, like I said, like, concessions. So.
The building blocks.
Yes.
For our carnival.
For our carnival made of prunes and
pickles.
And
And chocolate. Because we're
Yep.
going to hire the chocolate wizard. He's going to build our carnival rides.
Yay!
Yeah.
Chocolate Carnival.
I'd trust that man. I'd go on his chocolate Ferris wheel.
Now that is a carnival ride I would get on without fear of bodily injury. Thanks for
lunching with us. We'll see you next time. Bye!
Bye! Our theme music is Red Onions by Louis Zong. Please check out the rest of his album Vegetable Soul in the description. You can follow us on Twitter at Girls Lunch. Nicole is also on Twitter at NicoleH262, and her website is NicoleHilton.com. Julia is smarter than all of us and not on social media. Thank you for listening. Can you hear Schmeagol?
Is he crying?
I think he's sitting outside the door crying. He hears me talking and wants to know like why he's not in the room.
Are you talking about me? I must have my share of the conversation.